Have you ever asked yourself any of these questions? How to pivot careers without starting over? How to figure out what job is right for me? How to change industries with no experience? How to find my next career path? What to do if I don't know what to do next? And the best way to transition into tech, corporate, business, SaaS, whatever it is you want to do. If you've ever asked yourself any of these questions, this video is for you. So stay tuned for the next 10 minutes as we go over it. Now, the answer is actually quite simple. I would say rather than going back to school to get another degree or certification or whatever the case might be, you want to do two things depending on where you're at. Either you pick an industry, meaning that if you're already in healthcare, let's say you're a social worker who's in healthcare, or you're a social worker who is in disability, or a social worker who is in veteran affairs, what I would recommend is that you pick that industry and then go into a startup, right? Meaning you will find a startup that specializes in maybe veteran affairs for healthcare or veteran affairs healthcare or something like that, right? Because what happens is that you might not know exactly what you want to do in this new era, but when you go to a startup, you end up kind of leaning into a rotation. And what I mean by rotation is that a lot of doctors or even people in like business school, and this is literally why you go to grad school, because you're getting case studies and you're getting internship experience, hopefully paid. Actually, if you're in grad school, especially if you're in MBA, it's probably paid. But what happens here is that you get to do a lot of things. Because in a startup, it's literally what it says. It's a startup, meaning that you are working in a place that needs you to do everything, especially if you're the first like 10, 15, 20 people. One, it's usually slightly easier to go into that space because what they're looking for is someone with expertise in something and then also someone who's willing to do the work. So if you have both of those, it is easier to get into tech going through the startup route, but then also you have the benefit, and you can see this is not a benefit, but to my lens, you have the benefit of then figuring out what you like to do. When I was in a startup, I was the third person hired, which means I did so much, right? So I was a customer success manager. I did some program management. I did some recruiting and people team stuff. I trained, I facilitated, I did enablement. I did implementation. A large part of my job was implementation, launch manager, onboarding, stuff like that, right? I did operations. My first role actually going from government to tech was partnerships and outreach manager. That was my first title. I did a ton of UX research, user experience research. So through all of these different things, sometimes my job title changed, sometimes it didn't. I also did marketing actually for a bit. I actually started my company's TikTok. I did all of this stuff. Sometimes my role changed, sometimes it didn't. But what it gave me insight into was, do I actually like this stuff? And if I liked it, and no one was hired for that role, I could learn more and lean into it more and say, hey, this is what I'm doing. If someone was hired into it, then I could have someone who had more expertise than me teach me the ropes. Either way, I learned a lot. So when I finally moved on from that company and I was looking for my next job, I knew that what I really, really liked was being a consultant or being someone who was external facing. This means that I don't like doing jobs that require me to stay in a project for a long period of time. I really enjoy learning quickly, executing, and moving on. And that is usually a consultant role, right? So that looks like when I was a launch manager, I supported companies who were onboarding new talent. So I worked with a lot of HR teams, a lot of people teams, but I literally worked with everyone. So even though I was working with HR teams a lot, I was working with HR teams in fintech. I was working with HR teams at hospitals. I was working with HR teams at airlines. So I was constantly learning new things and meeting new people, but I had a through line where it was like, well, my job is to help you onboard apprentices or people who do not have 4-year degrees. So I have that knowledge as my base. And because I'm working with so many different people, I'm seeing some things that are consistent that I can always apply, and I'm seeing some things that are different and new, and I get to learn, and we get to learn together. And that really was something I cared about a lot. And when I moved over to my new job, now I work as a change management strategist, which means that I'm able again to work with several different companies to help them bring on tech change. So that's what I do. And in all of this, the only way I was able to learn what I wanted to do, because you don't know so much. If you're like me and you grew up in an immigrant household where what I call the the kindergarten professions, which is become a doctor, become a lawyer, become an engineer, maybe become a teacher, you don't know, right, all the different things available to you. That's one. Two, our economy and our job market is changing so much. The jobs that were available that I thought, even if I knew everything, right, when I was 10, 15, 20, those jobs, some of them might still be here, but there's so many more new jobs that have come up, right, in the past 10 years, 15 years since I've been working. So it would actually be a huge disservice to myself if I kept the one-track mind about what I wanted to do, right? So it's being open to possibility, right? And I want to offer this thing that one of my favorite creators, Miley Teal, do we say threaded? We used to say tweets. So I don't know if we're saying threaded now, but she threaded, what you know can take you far. What you stay open to will take you further. And I think this is so important for this space because what you know is your expertise. Like, I really know how to do discovery, how to listen to people, how to teach adult learning, stuff like that. But I don't know all the different places that'll take me, because 10 years ago, what that looked like when I was a school social worker was teaching other social workers at that point. I mean, when you're in your second year, how much are you really teaching? But teaching the people behind me, like, oh, this is what I know, this is what worked for me, right? Then when I was working in government, I was teaching teachers, veteran teachers and new teachers, software and technology, and how do you merge these two together to teach what you need to teach. And then being in tech, there's so many ways I'm teaching and facilitating and doing that, right? So there are things that I know concretely, but there's so much more I don't know. So I'm very open to that. So with that said, the first thing is join a startup. If you can and you're willing to do the work and put in the hours, joining a startup will give you so much flexibility and give you that rotation that you need to be helpful, right? So if you're asking yourself any of these questions of like how to pivot careers without starting over, the best way to transition, you're confused but you're cautious about where to go next because you want to make sure you're landing safely, again, I would say join a startup, right? Because if you're trying to pivot and you have no idea what you actually want to do next, working at a startup might be the fastest way to figure it out. Because you're getting paid, you're getting experience, all of that, right? Also, if you're not really sure what kind of work really fits you, a startup can give you a bit of a career clarity that you normally get from years of trial and error. And a startup will give you that in months because of how quickly it moves. So I just want to consider that. And then if you want to pivot, but you know you need to build a new skill set fast, rather than going to take another course or degree where you're investing, but maybe you don't have that capital to invest. If you do that at a startup, everyone is learning and growing so quickly that it's rapid. You're going to learn what you need to learn very, very quickly, and people won't necessarily be mad at you for failing if you do fail, because it's going to be a learning experience for everyone, right? So it's great. Like, there's no environment that'll level you up like a startup. So definitely explore it, all right? I think I've shared this enough, but startup is number one. And then number two is projects. So if you're looking to pivot and you're not sure what to do and you don't want to move to a startup, I would say create your own projects. Figure out what you're curious about. Let's say you're curious about AI right now. Create a workflow. Create automations, right? Use AI in your everyday work and see, do I like this? Prompt engineer. And if you like it enough, start sharing what you're learning and the results on a place like LinkedIn or any other social media. But if your goal is a job, LinkedIn is probably the best place for that marketplace and that visibility. If you're just dabbling and you're not super pressed for a job right now, then share it anywhere you want, right? Do a Substack, do a TikTok, whatever the case might be. But the goal here is that you're producing something and you're sharing that with the world and you're learning how to explain it. You're learning the methodology behind it, which is really, really important. So to recap, if you are someone who is looking to pivot. If you're trying to pivot and you don't know where to start, right? I would recommend going to startups because it's the closest thing most people will get to a rotational program, right? And the examples of rotational programs are in medicine, you do rotations in 4 different departments: pediatrics, surgery, internal medicine, right? You do all this before you choose your specialty. In consulting or in big firms, interns rotate through teams so they see where they fit best. However, most people don't get this chance because you're not in those fields and or you're not going back to school. So create that for yourself by going to a startup, because they force you to do your own version of rotations. 1 week you're doing marketing, the next week you're helping with products or custom support. You learn what energizes you and what drains you very, very quickly. And if you listen to that, you can then do several things. Within that company or that startup, you can niche down and then go down that pathway and learn more. And then next thing you know, you start out as like an analyst in marketing, and the next thing you know, you're like CMO. That's how startups work. Or if your startup is not some place you want to stay, but you now have this experience, you can take that experience and then move on to a more established company or whatever the case might be. So that's number 1 way to pivot. The second way is to do a project. All right. If this was helpful, please let me know in the comments. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, let me know in the comments. If you're looking to pivot and you're not sure where to start, there are several options. You can work with me one-on-one. I'm also doing an accelerator program where this is exactly that we talk about. How do you find a startup? How do you find a healthy startup? and how do you curate your resume and network to make sure that you're landing jobs quickly? Also, I have a book. So if you know you can do this by yourself, you can just purchase a book and go through all the steps. It's laid out for you step by step. I have gone through this process a number of times myself and with other people. So that's what's available for you. Alrighty, I will see you tomorrow.